Before dessert drinks became a social media stunt, Chicago had already created one of the most ridiculous milkshakes in America. A chocolate cake shake, which is exactly what it sounds like, and somehow even more dangerous than it sounds. At Portillos, the famous Chicago chain known for hot dogs, Italian beef, cheese fries, and big red and white nostalgia, the cake shake takes a full slice of chocolate cake, frosting and all, drops it into a vanilla shake, and blends the whole thing into something that feels less like a beverage and more like a dare. But the weird part is not just that people drink cake through a straw. The weird part is that this dessert makes perfect sense once you understand Chicago food culture. Chicago has never been shy about excess. This is the city of deep dish pizza, Italian beef dipped in gravy, hot dogs dragged through the garden, and food that seems designed to ruin a white shirt before lunch is over. So when a restaurant took a slice of chocolate cake and said, "What if we made this drinkable?" Chicago did not panic. Chicago basically said, "Finally, someone is thinking clearly." Portillo's story starts long before the cake shake became famous. In 1963, Dick Portillo opened a tiny hot dog stand in Villa Park, Illinois, with an investment of about $1,100. It was called the Dog House, and it was not glamorous. It was a small trailer, the kind of place that had to win people over with speed, flavor, and word of mouth, because there was no fancy dining room doing the work for it. Over time, that little stand grew into Portillos, a restaurant chain that became almost impossible to separate from Chicago identity. To a lot of people, Portillos is not just fast food. It is the place you stop after a game, the place relatives ask for when they come back home, the place where an Italian beef sandwich and a chocolate cake can feel like a family memory. And that is why the cake shake became more than a menu item. It became a local ritual. The cake itself is part of the legend. Portillo's chocolate cake is soft, dark, moist, and covered in thick fudge frosting. People have argued for years about what makes it so moist, and one of the most famous rumors is that mayonnaise is involved. Whether that is true or not, the rumor fits the personality of the cake perfectly, because mayonnaise in chocolate cake sounds strange until you remember what mayonnaise actually is. Eggs, oil, and acid, all things that can help a cake stay rich and tender. That is the kind of food fact Americans love, because it sounds wrong, then suddenly sounds genius. But the shake takes the mystery one step further. Instead of treating cake like something that belongs politely on a plate, Portillo's treats it like an ingredient. A slice goes into the blender with vanilla shake mix, and the result is thick, cold, chocolatey, and full of tiny pieces of cake and frosting. It is smooth enough to drink, but chunky enough to remind you that, yes, you are consuming an actual slice of cake in liquid form. The origin story makes it even better. The cake shake is often described as a clever way to use cake slices that were still good, but not ideal to sell as perfect fresh slices. Instead of wasting them, the restaurant could blend them into shakes. In other words, one of Chicago's most famous desserts may have started as practical restaurant math. Reduce waste, sell something fun, and make customers feel like they discovered a secret. That is how a lot of iconic American foods are born. Not from a chef in a silent room designing the future, but from someone in a busy restaurant looking at leftovers and asking, "Can we sell this in a smarter way?" The same spirit gave America potato chips, nachos, buffalo wings, and half the foods people now pretend were planned from the beginning. The cake shake belongs in that same family. It is messy, profitable, memorable, and slightly absurd. And it works because it hits multiple American food instincts at once. First, it feels familiar. Everyone understands chocolate cake. Everyone understands a milkshake. Put them together and there is no learning curve. Second, it feels excessive. Americans love a food that can be explained in one sentence and still make people say, "Wait, they do what?" Third, it has texture. A regular chocolate shake is just chocolate-flavored sweetness, but a cake shake has crumbs, frosting pockets, and little moments where the straw catches something thicker than expected. That tiny surprise is the whole point. It is not just flavor, it is an experience. And then there is the salty sidekick, fries. People do not just drink the cake shake. A lot of Portillo's fans dip fries into it, which sounds like chaos until you remember that sweet and salty is one of the most powerful combinations in American snacking. French fries and a milkshake already have history together. The cake shake just makes the milkshake heavier, richer, and more dramatic. A hot, salty fry going into a cold chocolate cake shake is basically the Midwest giving up on restraint and creating balance anyway. That is the hidden genius of it. The cake shake is extreme, but it is not random. It sits right at the intersection of diner culture, fast food efficiency, bakery nostalgia, and Chicago appetite. It also says something about how regional food becomes famous now. For decades, a place like Portillo's could be huge in Chicago but still feel like a local secret to outsiders. You had to visit or know someone from Illinois, or hear about it from a friend who would not stop talking about Italian beef. But once food videos became popular, the cake shake was built for the internet. It has a visual hook. It has a simple reveal. It has a sentence that makes people stop scrolling. They put an entire slice of cake in the shake. That is all you need. The food explains itself. No complicated technique, no rare ingredient, no delicate plating. Just cake, shake, blender, and disbelief. But beneath the viral appeal, there is also a very old American pattern. Restaurants have always turned abundance into identity. Bigger burgers, loaded fries, giant sundaes, bottomless drinks, unlimited refills, double-stacked sandwiches, and desserts that seem designed for two people but are sold to one person with confidence. The cake shake fits that tradition perfectly. It is not trying to be elegant, it is trying to be unforgettable. And in fast food, unforgettable is sometimes more valuable than refined. A normal milkshake is good. A chocolate cake shake is a story. You can tell someone about it before they taste it. You can describe it to a friend. You can post it. You can argue about whether it is brilliant or disgusting. That argument is part of the product. In a world where every restaurant wants attention, Portillo's ended up with a menu item that naturally creates conversation. It also creates nostalgia, which may be even stronger. For Chicago families, Portillo's chocolate cake shows up at birthdays, graduations, office lunches, sports celebrations, and random weeknights when nobody wants to cook. So when that cake becomes a shake, it carries more emotional weight than a normal novelty dessert. It is not just sugar. It is memory in a cup. That is why people defend regional chains so intensely. It is never only about the food. It is about where you ate it, who you were with, what neighborhood you were in, and what stage of life it reminds you of. The cake shake may look like a gimmick from the outside, but for some people, it tastes like home. And that is the strange power of American fast food history. The foods that seem the least serious often reveal the most about culture. A chocolate cake shake tells us about restaurant waste, local pride, internet virality, childhood nostalgia, and the American talent for turning a simple idea into a spectacle. It tells us that people do not always want dessert to be subtle. Sometimes they want dessert to look them in the eye and make a terrible promise. And Portillo's delivered exactly that. A slice of cake could have stayed on a plate. A milkshake could have stayed a milkshake. But someone put them together, and suddenly Chicago had a drink that was also a dessert, a joke, a tradition, and a warning label. So the next time you see a cake shake, do not think of it as just a ridiculous sugar bomb. Think of it as a perfect little piece of Chicago food logic. Practical enough to use leftover cake, indulgent enough to become famous, simple enough for anyone to understand, weird enough for everyone to remember. That is how you turn a slice of chocolate cake into a local legend. And that is why one of America's most unforgettable milkshakes begins with a sentence that still sounds fake. Yes, they really put the cake in the blender.